The sun was sinking low in the sky, casting long golden shadows over the wide, empty plains. The wind whispered across the dry grass, carrying the faint smell of dust and earth. Thomas McAllister, the rancher, stood near his barn, brushing the sweat from his brow. Life on the ranch was simple, filled with long days of work, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and keeping the small property running. He liked the quiet, the routine, and the sense that everything was under his control. That peace, however, was about to be broken. From far down the dusty road leading to his ranch came a sound that made Thomas pause. At first it was faint, almost indistinguishable from the wind. But then he heard a voice, shaky and desperate. "Please, just make it quick," the voice called. It was faint but urgent, carrying across the fields. Thomas squinted toward the horizon, trying to see who could be calling out. A young woman appeared, staggering along the road. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and her face was streaked with dust and tears. She moved slowly, limping with every step, clearly exhausted. Thomas felt a sudden surge of concern. Something had gone terribly wrong, and she needed help. He put down his tools and walked toward her, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. "Ma'am, what happened?" he asked gently as he approached. The young woman looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. She fell to the ground, trembling, as if the effort to speak was too much. Thomas knelt beside her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now. Tell me your name." She swallowed hard, shaking her head. "Emily," she whispered at last. Emily's voice was weak, but Thomas could tell she was exhausted and in pain. Bruises marred her face and arms, and her torn clothing suggested she had been through something terrible. He offered her water from his canteen and a blanket he kept in the saddlebag. She took both, her hands shaking as she held them, and for a moment relief washed over her face. Thomas helped Emily to his ranch house. The building was small and simple, but it offered safety, shade, and shelter from the world outside. He led her inside, helping her to sit on a sturdy wooden chair near the fireplace. Emily's knees were shaking and her hands gripped the blanket tightly. "Rest for a moment," Thomas said. "You're safe here." Emily nodded, closing her eyes for a short while. The exhaustion in her body was so deep it seemed to seep into her very bones. When she was ready to speak, Emily's story came out in small fragments. She had been traveling with a group of settlers who were moving toward a town several miles away. Along the way, they had been attacked. Bandits had taken their belongings, injured her companions, and left her for dead. She had run, hoping to survive, and somehow, by chance or luck, she had found her way to Thomas's ranch. Thomas listened quietly, his heart heavy with each word. He had faced many challenges on the ranch, droughts, storms, sick animals, but he had never encountered a human story like this, filled with fear, courage, and sheer survival. Emily had been through so much, and yet here she was, alive. He poured her some more water and handed it to her carefully. "You're safe now," he said. "No one will harm you here. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Emily's lips quivered, and for the first time since arriving, a tiny glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Thomas tended to some chores outside while keeping a watchful eye on Emily. Every now and then he would return to check on her, bringing a small snack or fresh water. She remained quiet, still recovering from the ordeal she had survived. But gradually she began to speak more, describing the attack, the fear she felt, and how she had managed to escape. Thomas felt a mixture of sadness and admiration. Sadness for what Emily had suffered and admiration for her bravery. She had endured a terrible experience and survived even when it seemed impossible. Her courage shone through even in her exhaustion and fear. That night, Thomas made a simple supper for both of them. Emily ate slowly, barely touching the food at first, but with gentle encouragement she began to eat more. The warmth of the meal and the comfort of the ranch began to ease her tension, though her eyes still held traces of the terror she had faced. After supper, Thomas prepared a small bed in a quiet corner of the house for Emily. She hesitated at first, unused to being cared for or protected, but she finally lay down, pulling the blanket over herself, and allowed herself to rest. Thomas watched her for a moment, thinking about how fragile life could be and how quickly things could change. That night, Thomas could not sleep. He sat by the window looking out over the ranch, thinking about Emily and what she had gone through. He thought about the danger that still existed beyond his fences, the cruel men who had hurt her and how lucky she had been to survive. He realized that life was unpredictable, that anyone could be thrown into danger at any moment. And yet he also felt a sense of purpose. He would protect Emily, give her a chance to heal, and make sure nothing like that ever happened to her again. Morning arrived with a soft glow. Thomas prepared a small breakfast and gently encouraged Emily to eat. She took her time, savoring the warm food, and slowly began to regain strength. Her eyes, though still cautious, looked brighter than the day before. There was a sense of relief in her posture, a small peace that had returned after the long night. As the day passed, Emily told more of her story. She spoke of the journey she had made, the dangers she had faced, and the moments when she thought she would not survive. Thomas listened, never interrupting, understanding that listening was sometimes the most important way to help someone heal. Together, they worked quietly around the ranch. Thomas showed Emily how to care for the animals and how to manage the small tasks that kept the ranch running. Emily learned quickly, her hands growing stronger, her confidence returning bit by bit. Each small success built her courage, helping her reclaim a sense of control over her life. Even as Emily began to heal physically, Thomas understood that the emotional wounds ran deep. He spent time with her, talking about lighter things, sharing stories from his own life, and helping her see that not everyone in the world was cruel. Slowly, Emily began to trust again, first in Thomas, then in the safety of the ranch itself. As the sun set over the plains, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Thomas felt a quiet satisfaction. The ranch, once only a place of routine and solitude, had become a refuge. Emily's presence had changed it, filled it with life, hope, and a reminder that survival and courage could bring people together. They settled into a pattern, careful but growing comfortable with each other's company. Emily rested when she needed to, worked when she was able, and slowly, day by day, the fear in her eyes began to fade. Thomas, meanwhile, continued his work, keeping watch, ready to protect her at a moment's notice. By the end of the first week, Emily was walking steadily, speaking more openly, and even smiling occasionally. Thomas noticed the subtle changes, realizing that small acts of kindness, safety, and patience could help someone recover from even the deepest scars. Life on the ranch returned to a rhythm, but it was different now. The simple routine carried the weight of shared experience and the beginnings of trust and friendship. Thomas knew that challenges still lay ahead, but for now, Emily was safe, and that was enough. The events of the past had been horrifying, but the present offered a glimmer of hope, a chance for healing, and the possibility that life could continue with courage, care, and resilience. The days grew longer and warmer as summer settled over the plains. Emily was recovering steadily, her strength returning with each passing day. She moved more confidently around the ranch, tending to the animals, carrying water, and helping Thomas repair fences. Even the simple tasks that once seemed impossible now felt manageable. Thomas watched her progress with quiet admiration. The young woman who had arrived trembling and broken was slowly reclaiming her life. Even as Emily healed physically, Thomas knew that the emotional wounds ran deep. She had seen cruelty and danger, and those memories could not be erased. He tried to give her space while remaining close enough for her to feel safe. They worked side by side, repairing fences, feeding the animals, and carrying out chores that had once seemed mundane, but now carried a new weight. Every day was a small victory for Emily, a step toward regaining control over her life. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Thomas noticed Emily standing at the edge of the field, staring at the distant hills. Her expression was thoughtful, almost distant. "I still see them," she said softly, her voice barely carrying over the breeze. Thomas walked over and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to forget," he replied gently. "What happened to you doesn't define your life. It's part of your past, but you can decide what comes next. You can be stronger than what you faced." Emily looked at him, her eyes reflecting both pain and determination. She nodded slowly, realizing that he was right. The events that had brought her to the ranch had been horrifying, but they had not broken her completely. She had survived, and now she had a chance to rebuild. Over the next few weeks, Emily grew more independent. She rode horses with Thomas, learning quickly and gaining confidence with every ride. She helped with the daily chores, sometimes laughing when mistakes were made and sometimes quietly observing, learning the ways of the ranch. Thomas noticed the subtle changes, the way she held herself, the steadiness in her voice, and the way her eyes no longer darted nervously at every sound. Their bond deepened as they spent more time together. Emily began to share small details of her life before the attack, memories of home, her family, and the dreams she once held. Thomas listened without judgment, offering encouragement and support. The ranch, once a place of routine and solitude, had become a home in every sense. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Thomas and Emily were working near the barn when distant hoofbeats reached their ears. Thomas's hand went instinctively to his rifle, and Emily ducked instinctively behind a barrel. They watched as a group of riders approached, dust rising from their horses' hooves. Thomas's heart raced. He had hoped the dangers that had chased Emily would not follow her here, but he knew the world outside the ranch was unpredictable. As the riders drew closer, it became clear that they were not the men who had attacked Emily. They were townsfolk, messengers bringing news of trouble nearby. Relief washed over Thomas, but he also realized that life on the plains was never truly safe. He and Emily made a silent agreement. The ranch would be a stronghold, a place of safety, but they could not avoid the world forever. Together they would face whatever came, prepared and united. Emily began helping Thomas in more ways than before. She kept records of the ranch, learned the trade of bartering with travelers and merchants, and even helped negotiate deals when Thomas needed assistance. Her intelligence and quick thinking impressed him, and he found himself relying on her insight more and more. Their relationship evolved naturally from protector and protected to partners working toward a shared goal. One night, as the wind swept across the plains and the stars began to shine above, Emily shared a secret she had kept hidden. She produced a small letter, carefully folded, detailing the full story of the attack she had survived. Thomas read the words with a heavy heart, imagining the fear, courage, and determination it had taken for Emily to survive. The horror of her past was almost unbearable to think about, but he knew that understanding it was part of helping her heal completely. Rather than despair, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would protect Emily and ensure that she would never have to face such danger again. The ranch, now more than ever, needed to be a place of security, a refuge from the cruelty of the world. Together they fortified fences, secured the horses, and made plans for anything that might threaten them. Emily, too, began to reclaim her sense of autonomy. She rode horses skillfully, handled tools with confidence, and even assisted with tasks that required courage and judgment. Each success built her confidence. Each accomplishment restored a piece of the life that had been threatened. Thomas watched in awe as she transformed from a frightened, weary girl into a strong, capable young woman. Life on the ranch became a balance of work and quiet moments of reflection. Thomas and Emily shared meals, exchanged stories, and grew comfortable in each other's presence. Laughter returned to the ranch, small and tentative at first, but gradually more frequent and heartfelt. Emily's smile became more genuine, her eyes brighter and her steps lighter. Thomas felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the simple acts of care and patience had helped her recover. Through shared effort, they also learned to rely on each other. When tasks were difficult, they worked together. When fears resurfaced, they comforted each other. A bond formed that was stronger than words. A bond built on trust, understanding, and shared experience. As weeks passed, Emily's past no longer haunted her every moment. She could ride freely across the plains, tending to animals and enjoying the wide open spaces. She spoke with confidence, made decisions, and even planned small improvements to the ranch. Thomas admired her resilience and courage, realizing that her survival had strengthened both of them. The ranch, once only a place of work and routine, had become a home filled with hope, determination, and the beginnings of a life built together. Thomas and Emily had faced danger, loss, and fear, but they had found strength in each other. They understood that the past could not be changed, but the future was theirs to shape. Even in the quiet moments when the wind rustled the grass and the stars shone above, Thomas felt a sense of peace. He had seen the horrors that had nearly destroyed Emily, but he had also witnessed her courage and resilience. Together they had built something lasting, a place of safety, a home, and a shared life that offered both protection and hope. Emily's transformation was remarkable. She went from a frightened, desperate girl to a strong, confident young woman, capable of facing the challenges of life on the plains. Her spirit, once fragile, was now resilient, and Thomas knew that their bond was unbreakable. They had faced fear and hardship, yet they had found comfort, trust, and companionship in each other. As the sun set over the wide plains, painting the sky with brilliant colors, Thomas and Emily stood together, looking out at the land they had nurtured and protected. They had survived, healed, and grown stronger. The horrors of the past had shaped them, but they had not defeated them. Instead, they had created a life filled with courage, hope, and the promise of a future together. The ranch was no longer just land, fences, and animals. It was a symbol of resilience, care, and trust. It was a home where safety and strength coexisted, where a young woman who had faced terrible danger could reclaim her life, and where a rancher could find purpose beyond his daily work. Together, Thomas and Emily had created a story of survival, healing, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Though the Wild West was a land of uncertainty, danger, and hardship, their story showed that courage, compassion, and trust could transform even the darkest experiences into a new beginning. Emily had found safety, Thomas had found purpose, and together they had built a life where hope and resilience flourished. The past could not be undone, but the future was theirs, and they faced it with strength, determination, and the unshakable bond they had forged on the open plains.